Hey guys, welcome back to the last tutorial for this section. In this section, we're going to be building a calculator. So, let's start. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to print our welcome message like usual. So we're just going to quickly do that. So here we have our welcome message, and all it says is welcome to calculator, and then we have our famous divider line just to make our app look a bit more fancy. So that's all we're going to do. Now the next step is we're going to have to go display a list of options for our user to choose from. So we're going to have add, subtract, divide, multiply, or exit the program altogether. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a function that's going to display all our options. So we're going to call this display options. And it's not going to have any arguments or parameters, so we can easily just print, and we can just do 1 for addition or 1 for add, and then 2 for subtract, 3 for multiply, and 4 for divide. And then we're going to have one more option, and that's just to exit our calculator altogether. So we're going to have 5 here, and it's going to be exit like so. So we have our function right here, and we are also printing our welcome message to the terminal. Now the next step is to call our function up here. And all we have to do to call our function is display options like this, and we had to put the parentheses right after to call our function. And now we are calling our function. Now we have finished the basic part of our calculator. And the next part is to get input from the user, because right now all we do is we're displaying and printing things to the terminal, but we actually can't get any input from the user. So we're going to create a variable and call it option, and it's going to use this input function right here. It's just going to say choose an option. So it's going to say choose an option, then we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 right here. Now that we're getting the input, we have to actually go check it, because let's say that they enter something that is not 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5. Let's say that it's a letter. Now if it's a letter, we want to go back and display the list of options and also ask them to go get input from the terminal again. So that means we're going to need to be looping in our program, because currently our program just gets to here, and once the user enters their input, then our program will end. But what we currently want is our user to exit the program whenever they press 5. So that means we're going to have to continually be looping indefinitely. So for that, we're going to use the while loop right here, and we're going to do while true, because we just want to keep on looping until the user enters 5. So we're just going to keep on looping forever. So while true, we're going to display the list of options, and we're going to get input from the terminal. Now we're going to perform our checks. The first check we're going to perform is if we're exiting our program or our calculator. So if our choice is 5, if our option is 5, then we're going to exit. So if option equals 5, then we're going to break this loop, which means that we're going to exit this loop and we are done. So now we can print an exit message like print, and here's the exit message that I'm going to be using, exiting the calculator, goodbye, like so. So if we enter 5 into our calculator, then we're going to go exit the calculator, and we're going to break from this while loop right here. So that is the first check. The second check we're going to be doing is if it's going to be one of these options, 1, 2, 3, or 4. If it's none of those options, that means we're going to have to go loop again and actually get 1, 2, 3, or 4. So if option is in this string, so we're going to do 1, 2, 3, or 4. So what's going on right here is we're checking if this option is in the string. So whatever value is entered into our option variable right here, we're going to be checking if it's in this string. So if it is in the string, then we're going to go into this if block. But we actually want to check if it's not in the string. So if it's not, like this, then we are going to actually want to go loop again. So we're going to want to go to the top, and then we're going to display a list of options again, and then we're going to go ask the user to choose an option from 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So the way to do that is to use the continue statement. And what this does is it skips all the following code right after, and it goes back to a new iteration. And now we're going to just print a message to our user saying that that is invalid input. So we're just going to put invalid input, please select a valid operation. So now we're going to be checking if the choice is valid. And if it's not valid, then we're going to go back to the top and redo this whole iteration again. Now once we have selected an operation, now we need to go ask the user to input numbers into our calculator. Otherwise, what's the point of having a calculator if we have no numbers to calculate? So what we're going to do is we're going to go ask the user to enter a number. So we're going to do num1, and that's going to just be input, enter a number. Then we're going to ask the user to enter another number, and we're just going to call this number 2 right here. And now we have that. And now what we want to do is we're going to convert these numbers into floats. Now throughout the course we have mostly been using integers and ints, but in this scenario we're going to be using floats because floats give us more precise mathematics and values. So instead of using an int, we're going to actually use a float, which is a decimal. So we're just going to use float, and we're just going to wrap this whole thing in a float. Now you might see there's a slight error with this, because if they enter something that is not a number, let's say a string like the word cat, the word cat cannot be converted into a float because, well, it just doesn't work that way in Python. And that's just going to go crash our program and give us an error. So how are we going to solve this situation? Well, the good way to solve this situation is by using the try and except statement. And how we're going to do that is we're going to try to run all this code. So we're going to do try, and then we're going to indent this and put this into our try block right here. And then we're going to go call except, or use our except clause. And now we can actually do something. And what we can do is we can say invalid input, please select a valid operation, or something like that. So here is what we can do. We can just do invalid number input, please enter valid numbers, and then we can continue. So what we're doing here is if they do not enter valid numbers, then we are going to go into this except clause right here, and we are going to go skip all the following code, and we're going to go back to the top of the iteration. So this is a shorter, more efficient way of catching errors and converting our input into a float all at once, instead of having to use if and else statements and check each value. Instead, we can just try to do all this in one go, and if it fails, then we're just going to go into this except clause right here, and then we're going to go back to the top of the iteration. Okay, so now we have practically made it to the end of our calculator program. So now all we have left is to operate on the numbers. So if option equals 1, then we are going to go add, and then we're going to do the same for 2. So if 2, we're going to subtract, 3 is going to be multiply, and 4 is going to be divide. So now you can see that we can use if statements like this, but instead we can also use elif. Or if we really want, we can do else. Because if it does not equal 1, 2, 3, that means that automatically equals 4, and that means we're going to be dividing regardless. So now if option equals 1, then we're going to have to add our numbers. Now what we can do is just do num like this, and then we can just do num like that, and just add them together like this. And then we can store it into a variable called maybe like result, and do that, and this would work. But instead, I want us to actually practice creating functions. So instead of doing it this way, we're going to actually go create a function that accepts parameters and then also returns the result. So what we're going to do is we have our function up here. We're just going to go create 4 functions, one for addition, one for subtraction, one for multiplication, and one for division. So if you want, you could go test that out first and try to do it by yourself. And everybody else, let's do this. So we're going to have our add, and we're just going to have 2 parameters right here, x and y. And then we're going to have our return statement, and we're just going to go add x plus y. So here we have our functions to perform the calculation, and if we want, instead of having it on 2 lines like this, we can actually make it a lot more shorter by just doing this. And in the next section, we're going to actually learn how we can make this shorter by using the lambda function. But for right now, all you need to know is that you can actually make this shorter by putting this all on one line. So if you have a one-line function like this, so we're just returning and that's all we're doing, then we can easily just put this on one line right after the colon. So now we have all our functions right here. Now we can just use them in our program. So we can go down here, and now instead of using result equals number 1 plus number 2. Now we can go use our add function, and now it just needs 2 parameters, or 2 arguments. So we're going to put number 1, and then we're going to put number 2. Now we can do the same for subtract. So instead of having the subtract comment right here, all we have to do is call subtract like this. So now we have our result variable right here, and it has a result of our 2 numbers that we have entered into the terminal. Now all we have to do is just print our result to the terminal so we can actually view it, and that part is super easy. So let's do this. So now we're displaying our result by just using our f string right here, and we're just doing result. Okay, so now that we have finished our program, let's actually go test it and see how everything is running. So if we run this, it starts off a bit crowded, so I don't like how there's no space, but we do have all these options right here. So let's just say we chose A, for example. It says invalid input, please select a valid operation. Then it gives us all of these again, so add, subtract, multiply, divide, and exit. And then if we do a different letter, it gives us the same error message right here. So now let's say that we did, let's say, I don't know, 20. Well, 20 doesn't work, so it says invalid input, please select a valid operation. So let's say we exit. We just want to exit our program. Actually, let's say we first want to add. So let's do 1, it says enter a number, and let's say that we enter T. Well, it says invalid number input, please enter valid numbers. So now we're going to do 1 again, enter a number, we're going to do 30, and we're going to enter another number, 40, so we should get 70 as our result, and that's exactly what we have, and then we loop back. So maybe let's try multiplication, which would be 3, enter a number, 5, 4, we get 20, because 5 times 4 is 20, and it's a float. So here you can see that this is a float, even though if we really want to, we can actually make it more precise by, let's say we do 1, we could do 4.7, and we could do 2.3, and that would give us 7. And that's exactly what we have. So with floats, you can see that the numbers can be a lot more precise than with integers. And now if we want to just exit this, all we have to do is hit 5, exiting the calculator, goodbye. So that is our calculator app in a nutshell. Of course, you can make this look a lot better by putting more spaces. If you want, you could actually put another divider. You could do so much with this. But for this project, this is how we're going to leave it. So that's it for this project. Thank you so much for joining me, and now you have finally finished half of this course. So continue learning, continue programming, and I'll see you in my next section.